who adventure travel instead of conventionally travel tend to accept a bit more risk than average people. Most people I know thought I was crazy to go on an 8-day private self-guided tour with a complete stranger. And to a country I'd yet to visit. Everything would be new to me. I didn't know the layout of the country. I couldn't speak the language. I didn't even know my travel partner. Yet she and I would spend a week together exploring what I now consider to be one of my favorite countries I've ever visited. And we figured things out. Today, we're going to Slovenia, part of the former Yugoslavia. It was an amazing adventure, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Let's cross that pond and head over to Slovenia on an adventure I'm sure you're going to add to your travel wish list. Two of my trips from 2020 were rescheduled for the fall of 2021, and there was going to be several weeks in between the two, so rather than going back and forth, I looked at the map and I saw, hey, there's Slovenia, tucked right in between the two. Italy, where I was going to hike the Dolomites, and you heard about that in episode 103 last month, and my bike and boating adventure in Croatia, which you're going to hear about next month. I frankly didn't know anything about Slovenia. The only person I knew who had ever been there was my girlfriend Sherry, and I vaguely recalled that she liked it. So I said, what the heck, I'm going to explore that during the time window that I had free. It really just didn't make any sense for me to go back and forth across the pond in such a short period of time. So I looked up my favorite adventure travel tour company groups to see what they had to offer. And I saw that my affiliate, One Foot Abroad, offered 3 tours, one of which was a self-guided, multi-sport tour where I could hike, bike, and paddle as a way to explore the country. That sounded perfect and would be a great segue between my Italian hiking and my Croatian biking adventures. I set the dates and I announced them in my newsletter and on the website in case somebody wanted to join me. It wasn't very long before I heard from listener Sharon. Next thing I knew, she and I were going to be roomies on a grand adventure. The plan was for Noma, who'd gone on the Dolomites hike along with me, to take the bus from Venice, where our Dolomiti tour ended, over to Ljubjiana, the capital of Slovenia. Peg, who also was in the Dolomites with us, wanted to do some hiking more in Portugal, so Noma and I just busted across the border. It was a really pretty drive, and we spent an extra couple of bucks for the front wide window seats on the double-deckered bus to get the best view. When Noma and I arrived, we met Sharon, and the 3 of us shared a lovely 2-bedroom Airbnb that Noma had found for us in the heart of the old town. Noma had a week or so that she could explore Slovenia before her flight home, so the 3 of us got to explore the beautiful city of Ljubljana together for several days. We arrived late in the day and went almost immediately out to dinner to a Roma, where we had something similar to a pizza, but the super-light crust was made with, I think, Mark, our charming server, said had 14 different kinds of flours in it. I'm not sure if it was traditional Slovenian food or not, but it was delicious, and we had that along with a nice hearty salad and the local beer. When we told Mark that we'd all met about 2 hours before, he said he thought we'd known each other forever, as we were laughing and chatting like old friends. I know people thought we were crazy to share an apartment with a complete stranger, but after several emails, I felt comfortable that Sharon was not an axe murderer, and if it turned out I was uncomfortable with her for any reason, I could always go my own way, and she had the same backup plan as well, it turned out. And because this was such an issue for folks, we staged at least we thought it was funny, a photograph like something out of Psycho. I don't want it posted online, but if you get my monthly newsletter, I'll put it in there so you get a laugh. If you don't get the monthly email right now, you can sign up at activetraveladventures.com or just write me directly at kit@activetraveladventures.com and I'll put you on the list. You have my no spam promise. The city of Ljubljana is absolutely beautiful. At this point on my trip, I've been to 11 European countries as I'm recording this, and I can't even tell you how many cities and villages, but it's a lot. And Ljubljana, I would place in my top 3 favorites. If you go, be sure to allow several days to explore this magical, historical, and walkable city. The old town is basically cut off from cars, so pedestrians and bikes roam freely. It's super safe, even at night. The Ljubjiana River runs through it, and so you can crisscross the river on several historical bridges. the most famous of which is the Triple Bridge. The original center bridge became too small for traffic, so instead of tearing it down and building a new one, Slovenia's most famous architect, Josef Plečnik, sure I said that wrong, came up with a clever solution that was both attractive and economical. He just added 2 more bridges that actually form a funnel to steer you into the city. He also designed the adjacent market and many fine structures throughout the country. Slovenians are very proud of Plečnik, and you'll see statues in his honor throughout the country. Across the 3 bridges is another hero of Slovenia, the poet Francis Prešeren. His massive bronze statue looks lovingly across the square towards a bust of his unrequited love that juts out from the side of a building. Interestingly, Slovenia's national anthem is actually a toast written by Prešeren himself. Above his statue is an angel, but she is nude and she is facing the church. The church was appalled, but locals didn't want to remove the offending angel, so the church planted trees in its entrance that now block the view of her exposed breasts. My favorite bridge is the Arched Dragon Bridge, one of Europe's first reinforced concrete bridges. Legend has it that Jason, the founder of Ljubjiana, and his Argonauts killed a dragon. Also, according to legend, when a virgin crosses the bridge, the 4-cornered dragons will wag their tails. I didn't see any wagging. Another curiosity is the Butcher's Bridge, which is covered in locks. Here, lovers padlock their love to the bridge and then throw the key in the river. Several interesting and creepy bronze sculptures by famed Slovenian sculptor Jakov Border also adorn the bridge, including a scary-looking man-lizard and some grotesque fish heads along with the railing. You also find some of his work in odd places around the city, including in a small alleyway where the water runoff channel is filled, interestingly enough, with small bronze heads. Throughout the old city, you'll find beautiful Baroque and Art Nouveau architecture, the latter being built after an earthquake toppled some of the older buildings, and that was the in style during reconstruction. The doors of the Church of St. Nicholas are incredibly beautiful sculptured brass. All are aged dark now except for the door that depicts the history of Slovenia. Down below, one of the noses is one that people touch for good luck, so it has a nice brassy shine. Downtown Ljubljana hosts the country's most important outdoor and indoor market, with vendors from across the country. Interesting, there are also vending machines that farmers stock with unusual products that we don't normally see in vending machines, say unskimmed milk. The milk machines allow you to fill your own container with fresh, unpasteurized milk and saves the farmer paying a middleman. They also sell basic fresh eggs, pharmaceutical items, and sometimes sandwiches via these vending machines. Ljubljana also has a castle, but unlike many of the castles I've visited, they've actually reworked the inside so the rooms provide function in today's society. You'll find temporary art exhibits, sometimes a small concert. You can access the castle by a funicular or take the steep walk up. During World War I, the castle was a POW camp, and you can see the remains of this in some of the cells. On the fresco of the chapel ceiling, the artist did a misspelling, painting an accidental third R in Österreich, the main seal. I wonder if he got punished in one of the cells for that. When I travel, it's not just the history and landscape that I want to understand, but I also want to see how do people do things. One thing in Slovenia I found very interesting was trash collection of all things. You would see these small, really teeny dumpsters for assorted waste, from regular trash to broken out recyclables, but they look way too small to hold the garbage for the several blocks that they were supposed to be accommodating. On trash pickup day, I found out why. The dump trucks lift the small dumpster to dump it, but underneath this small dumpster, there's a large platform that comes up. So underneath the ground, there's a huge dumpster that's like 6 times larger than the one that you see above ground. So the trash is getting funneled into the dump truck via these small dumpsters that act kind of like a funnel. It's really super clever, minimizes the unsightliness, and was a great solution. There are also flower boxes in most windows. During the late summer, most were filled with petunias or geraniums, but I saw in the market lots of pansies, so I'm guessing the boxes are about to be switched out. Yes, it requires daily watering, but how lovely to look at, just masses and masses of window boxes as you walk down the street. The houses themselves are very Bavarian looking, with white or light-colored stucco and dark wooded beams and terraces. Roofs are usually red tile, often composite now, or a dark metal. The terraces and windows are filled with window boxes in virtually all windows. It was so charming. Many houses have their own shrine to either Jesus or Mary. They are built of high quality and are regularly attended to with flower offerings and candles. These are mostly freestanding, but they are sometimes an integral part of the wall of a home. While in Ljubjiana, Sharon arranged for some fun day tours for us. We took a 3-hour food tour that not only introduced us to local specialties and cuisine, but we also learned a bit of the history. A later walking history tour filled in the gaps. I had figured that Slovenian food would be really too heavy for my taste, but I actually found it to be quite good. We ate in an assortment of strukli, which is a filled dumpling that could be savory or sweet, some local sausage, a delicious turnip stew, fantastic pumpkin seed oil. Make sure to buy some of that if you find it. It was that good. And of course, home-baked bread and cheeses. The local wine is not only tasty, but very inexpensive. And while we didn't taste it, they also eat horses here. And you can tell which stalls in the market sell horse meat because they'll have a silhouette of a horse head in the window. Most of the produce in Slovenia is organic and local. They proudly do not have mass farms here. One other really fun tour we took was to go see the Skogen Caves, which is a UNESCO Natural Heritage Site. International scientific circles have acknowledged the importance of these caves as one of the natural treasures in the planet. Ranking among one of the most important caves in the world, Skogen Caves represent the most significant underground phenomenon on the Karst Plateau and in Slovenia. Karst, a new word for me, is a topography formed by the dissolution of soluble rocks such as limestone, dolomite, and gypsum. It's characterized by underground drainage systems and sinkholes and caves. Over the next couple of weeks, I get to see how this dissolving rock created some of the most amazing soil sculptures I have ever seen. The cave itself is ginormous. Early explorers built a via ferrata to get around. Remember via ferratas from the Dolomites episode? These are metal cables bolted to rock sides, so you have something to hold on to as you climb the rock. I think they said it had 11 kilometers of via ferratas, and because they would explore the cave, they were using a torch. They really didn't know for ages how large this cave system was. So I definitely recommend a side trip to visit Skogen Caves when you go to Slovenia. And since Italy is so close by, our delightful and fun guide, Ziga, took us for an espresso across the border, just because we could. If you look at the map, Italy kept most of the Adriatic coastline, including Trieste, but Slovenia does have a bit of coastal access a bit further south. In addition to the Skogen Caves, we also went to see the Lipica Stud Farm, the cradle of the famous Lipinzer horses. Frankly, this wasn't my favorite, but it could just because we had a poor Lipsic guide. The studs were locked in their stalls, so I felt sorry for them. However, the mares and the fowls, several dozens of them, were racing and romping across the pasture, and that was a fun sight to see. And while it wasn't part of our booking, Ziga took us on a detour to see the Pajama Castle. This is a magnificent castle built into the side of a mountain. I would call that castle and a monastery I saw similarly built into the rock that I saw in Bosnia as my favorites on this trip. After taking dozens of tours on this European adventure these last 5 months, I can attest to how important it is to have a good guide. I've been pretty lucky, but there are definitely a few duds. Fortunately, our main guide today, Ziga, was fantastic. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so you can hire him when you go. Ziga also took us to a small village that looked like nothing was going on. He parked the car and said we'd be having lunch here, and we're like, where? We didn't see any restaurant. He opened this large wooden door, which revealed a charming courtyard where we could enjoy the flowers and the breeze while being protected from the sun by an overhead umbrella. Another advantage of hiring a local. They know not only where to go, they also know what to order. After picking his brain about all things Slovenia, it was time to drive back through the countryside to get back home. What a great day. After having our culture fix in Ljubjiana, it's time to head to Kranjska Gora to start our one-foot-abroad multi-sport adventure. On day one, all we had to do was get here. You can take a bus or a train. We chose the bus and then walked to our really nice lodge just a few blocks from the main drag. You may have heard of Kranjska Gora. It's where they hold the Alpine Skiing World Cup Series every winter. Kranjska Gora is a charming town that sits below the rugged and jagged peaks of the Julian Alps. We arrived early in October, which is after the summer hiking season, but before the ski season, so things were nice and quiet. There's a bit of nip in the air, but it's not cold. The leaves are just beginning to turn. The air is crisp and clean. Sharon and I enjoyed just relaxing and hanging out at a cafe, drinking in the sights. I love the alpine architecture, the white stucco sides and the brown trim. Like I said, they're invariably filled with tiny little window boxes bursting with blooms. I have already fallen in love with Slovenia. That evening, a representative from One Foot Abroad came to meet us at the hotel and gave us a very thorough instructions on how we were supposed to go about our trip. Our tour will mostly focus on and around Slovenia's one national park, Triglav, named after its highest peak, Mount Triglav, at 8,265 feet or 2,755 meters high. The surrounding mountains are gorgeous, and you see remnants of a glacier in the distance. At this orientation meeting, we were given a small notebook that had step-by-step instructions on where we were supposed to go each day. And there was a color photograph with an arrow for every turn. I think we only missed one turn the whole week, and it wasn't a big deal. We could see the town below, so we just had to get there. We also learned that a tasty hot breakfast was included each day, so we never start our adventure hungry, that's for sure. And if you don't want to leave the inn each night, you can arrange for your tour to include dinner as well. The food in Slovenia is great, so no matter which way you choose, you're going to do fine. Breakfast in Slovenia means a cheese and sliced ham platter, a fruit bowler platter, homemade bread with homemade jams and spreads, a choice of made-to-order breads, cereals, fresh squeezed juice, and coffee or tea. You can also order cooked-to-order eggs and other items. Each day we pick up cheese, bread, and fruit at the grocery store for our lunch, as we generally won't be near a town for lunchtime. At the store, you weigh and print out labels of your chosen produce, so the cashier just scans the code. Bring your own bag or put it in your day pack. We chose to go out for dinner each night and never had a loser. Our first day of hiking was quite pretty. It was an out and back around Lake Jasna, a lake with crystal clear green aqua, teal, and blue coloring, depending on how the sun was hitting it and the water depth. You could see the trout swimming about. When we hiked through the farms, the goats and sheep and cows would keep us entertained. I loved seeing all the babies go to mom for a drink. The 10-mile, 16-kilometer hike wasn't overly hard, so we got to enjoy a leisurely stroll up and over the hills in the Jasna Valley, surrounded by these glorious mountains. We ate our packed lunch at a nice sunny spot where we could relax and just soak in the views. Whenever we were up high, we could look down on patches of evergreen forest cutting through the pastures dotted with farmhouses and the occasional chapel. It made for a pretty contrast. Moody clouds made for pretty photographs, although it never rained that day. Speaking of weather, you can do this trip any time of year. The best times are April through October, with the busiest times being from June through August. Sharon and I went in early October, which was perfect. You can go in the off-season from November to March, but it's going to be really quiet and you're going to run into snow and, of course, cold. Many places are going to be closed. One Foot Abroad makes it really easy to do this trip on your own. Not only do they make the lodging arrangements for you, and they were all exceptionally nice, but when necessary, they'll transport your luggage, say on days we hiked or biked one way instead of an out and back. And when we had to get somewhere by car, a van was waiting to transport us at the appointed time. The same van would drop off and pick up our bikes, and of course the bikes and kayaks were also included. Both Cher and I opted for e-bikes, which I would highly recommend. Our rafting trip was also included. One Foot Abroad can also make airport transfer arrangements for you if you want them to. And this was a self-guided tour. And that means that One Foot Abroad organized all the logistics for us, but outside of meeting the rep on day one and our van driver, Sharon and I were on our own to execute the plan they had worked out for us. OFA was on call 24/7 in case of any problems, but we never had reason to call. We would hike by many lakes that first day. Some lakes had what looked like mini dark green forested islands on the bottom. It must be some kind of special algae or something. It's quite pretty. The Julian Alps above us were tall and jagged. The rock is white and gray, and the forest becomes thinner and thinner until you reach the tree line, where of course the trees stop altogether. At Lipsic Pass on Lake Jasna, you come across a large bronze billy goat on a rock. This is Ladarog, a mythical mountain goat with golden horns whose job it is to guard the lake. This is one famous goat. You're going to see statues and images of this goat everywhere. Bars and businesses are named after the goat. My favorite local beer, Lasco, has that goat as his logo. It's said if you rub the golden horns, you're going to have good luck. So when you return from your hike, sit down and enjoy a cold one, maybe try one of the goat beer Lascos, and people watch along this magical, spectacular lake. Sharon and I decided we're going to like this tour. We also like the accommodations and that we only have to move twice. This is smart and saves a lot of time and aggravation. The next day was a biking day. About 25 miles, 40 kilometers, we would be cycling to Lake Bled. Our bikes were delivered in the morning, and as I said, Sharon and I both ordered e-bikes. I had no idea how high the mountains were going to be, and I wanted some backup. E-bikes have 4 power levels: Eco, Tour, Mountain, and Turbo. You can easily go a half a day or more in a single charge as long as you don't abuse the power support. Eco gives you just a bit of oomph and support, Tour a bit more, Mountain yet more, and then boom, Turbo, full-on support. But you still need to pedal. There's a monitor that tells you how much juice you have remaining. Because of the batteries, e-bikes are heavy, so you do not want to run out of juice or you're going to be pedaling a 50-pound bike back to base when you're pooped. I generally left mine off or in eco mode and only used it when I needed a little break or I had to climb a steep section. The ride, of course, was beautiful. Frankly, everything in Slovenia is beautiful. I've never been to Switzerland, but I think of Slovenia as a regular person's Switzerland. Nothing ostentatious, but everything has an alpine slant and is cute and tidy. I can only recall one beat-up-looking barn my entire visit. Most windows have colorful window boxes with the current season's blooms. No litter. Homes have what I'd call a victory garden. Most people seem to grow what they need. You'll see a few fruit trees and full-on, again, very tidy vegetable gardens. We are here at the end of summer. In the U.S., at the end of summer, most gardens are a disaster because folks have given up on them in the heat. Not here. Here, the homeowner ventures into the garden each day to see what's ripe and then determines what's for dinner. It doesn't get any fresher than that. They also don't use pesticides here, so everything is organic. Bees are very important in Slovenia, and of course it's bees who pollinate many of our fruits and vegetables. In fact, in Ljubjiana, all plants in the boxes have to be pollinators. Most of our bike ride was alongside the Sava River, a river that runs into Slovenia's longest river, the Sava River, a river we'd come to know quite well during our visit. Most of our tour itself is in and around Slovenia's only national park, Triglav. For lunch, we stop at a mountain hut beneath Slovenia's tallest mountain, Mount Triglav. From there, we took a recommended detour to check out Vintner Gorge, a 1-mile gorge with walls almost 500 feet high. It's just a few kilometers outside of Bled, and it's carved by the Redovna River. We locked up our bikes and headed in to see the gorge. Quite the sight. There were 2 paths back to our bikes. We opted for the longer one that takes you high up on the ridge, so you get to look down on a delightful valley below. You get to go through pastures, and in fact, we had to alert a local farmer about a sick horse. We didn't have cell service and couldn't speak Slovenian, but between the farmers' broken English and our pantomime, we conveyed the problem. From the gorge, it was back into Lake Bled, the end to another satisfying day. I love this tour. I love this country. We bike again the following day, 22 miles, 35 kilometers. So on this, our second day of biking, we bike through the heart of Triglav National Park, often along the river, and forest littered with World War II monuments. As an American, I feel blessed that my nation has not had battles on our soil in over a century. When in Europe, I cannot help but be reminded about how lucky I am. On bike days, you're basically biking about a half a day, which gives you plenty of time to explore and stop and take photos or get a cappuccino, wine, or a beer. This is not a hardcore trip, so you're going to find it refreshing and relaxing. Today we biked through a lot of small villages, timing one to arrive at noon when the local church bells went wild. While we're often on roads, they're quiet ones, and I never felt nervous. And a lot of times we're on dedicated bike paths. I love how in these villages you could have a barn just 2 blocks from the main intersection. And like I said, everything is nice and tidy. Homes and gardens are really well kept. You don't see any litter and nothing is run down. The people are friendly, and I could tell by the way they looked at us that our tour took us through some villages that are rarely touristed. I love that. People always ask me if it's hard to get around a particular country if you can't speak the language. Here's a fun story. All the Slovenians I met told me they could speak English before they ever made it to school. Where did they learn it? From watching the Cartoon Network. Slovenia produces little, if any, original programming, so almost everything they watch comes from the U.S. and it's subtitled. So the kids pick up English from TV, videos, and movies. The teachers just polish up their English a bit. You're not going to have a problem getting around communicating, particularly with young people. We stopped in the blacksmith village of Scopa. The museum was closed that day, but we could see some of the local industry monuments around town. You can take a tiny detour to visit a beekeeping museum in Radovljica, which is a darling medieval walled village en route. We didn't go that day, but I went myself the next afternoon. The small square is in great condition, and you can get a pretty view over the north wall to the valley down below. Slovenia's most famous architect, Ivan Vernik, whom we learned about in Ljubjiana, is from here, and there's a statue of him by the main church. On this biking day, there are a lot of mountain ascents, so be sure to preserve your battery juice. Right, Sharon? I teased because Sharon had used up most of her battery that day, so my free day the next day, I ended up returning back to Radovljica to check it out on my own. We wanted to make sure her bike was going to make it back to town. It was really fun whizzing down the mountains, and I observed Sharon from behind. She is fearless. Me, I suggest they check the brakes on my bikes before renting it out again. I had a really bad fall last spring, so I was a bit more twitchy than Sharon when going downhill. On a steep slope where it wasn't easy to stop on a dime, I pulsed my brakes regularly in case a car, kid, dog, or ball ran in the path unexpectedly. Sharon, on the other hand, whizzed down impressively. On one afternoon when I could see a quarter mile ahead that nothing possibly could surprise me, I did allow myself to whiz, and I clocked in at 47 kilometers an hour. It was quite exhilarating. I just love going through all the little villages. What a fun day. So far we've hiked and we've biked. Now it's time to paddle. We're going to raft the Sava River for a half a day. You don't need any experience to do this rafting trip. It was mostly Class 1 and Class 2 rapids, meaning it was pretty mild. I'm sure in the spring it's a bit rougher due to snow melt. Our ride in the late fall was quite calm, so we got mostly to sit back and just enjoy the scenery. It was another day that was threatening rain, so some of the peaks weren't visible, unfortunately. The weather was darkly overcast with that threat of rain. Actually, this gloom added a really cool, misty, otherworldly look to the river, although it did hide the Julian Alps from view. The wetsuits provided kept us warm, and it was a lot of fun. One gal from Belgium had never been on a raft before, and it was fun to watch her go from being scared to enjoying the moment. No doubt she'll raft again. Our guide Pablo had a smile that never ended, and I would love to bottle it. An engineering student most of the time, when his schedule permits, he guides the Sava River. He'd rafted this river over 500 times, and the joy in his face, frankly, like all river gods I've ever met, showed his love of the river. Pablo was also mischievous. If there was a rock, we would hit it, to the shockful delight of the Belgian woman. There was a rock you can jump off. The Belgian woman's boyfriend was the only one that did so. I jumped off a tall rock in New Zealand and in Costa Rica, so I figured I needed to get cold for the thrill of it. But I was glad somebody did it. When commanded by our guide, we'd paddle around whatever obstacle was ahead. He'd yell, "Forward, forward!" And hopefully in unison, we would paddle forward until he said to stop. Ditto paddle back, or right paddle, left paddle when he wants us to turn the raft. He's got the hard job. We are merely some of the manpower. His job is to steer and to guide us safely through the river. After a fun morning rafting trip, in the afternoon you have free time, so you can wander Lake Bled, or like me, take advantage of still having the e-bike. I went a little further afield back to the town that we missed the day before. Sharon wandered the lake while I biked. Even though we've gotten along great, it's still nice to have some alone time to go at your own pace and to do exactly what you want to do. The town of Lake Bled is charming as well. It's a village out of a postcard. Not only is there a church on the island, there's also a castle on a cliff. And like most of Slovenia, the architecture is cute and everything is tidy. There's a 4-mile path you can walk or bike around the lake, and there's outdoor cafes everywhere. From our hotel, which was super nice, we could see the church on the island. It's a scene you simply cannot take enough pictures of. At the church, there are 99 steps to reach the chapel entrance. New grooms carry their brides up the stairs and then ring the bell for good luck. Now that's love. You get to the island via a traditional wooden boat known as a pletna, a flat-bottomed wooden boat with a colorful awning. You can also rent a rowboat. The water was choppy during our free afternoon, so Sharon and I passed on that, although she went back later after we parted ways so that she could do so. One odd thing about Slovenia that Sharon and I could never figure out. Breakfast normally wasn't until around 8 o'clock. You have midday lunch, that was about normal, but you better be finished with your dinner by 7:30 or 8 because the restaurants would be closed. Maybe it's because we weren't there in the summer season. It was very strange. It's like the whole town shut down. It's very different from most of Europe where things don't even get going until 8, 9, 10 o'clock. I don't know what the reason was, but we did learn to pay attention to the clock. We'd found a cute pub overlooking the castle from the other side of the lake. While enjoying our beer, a young couple sat down at the table next to us. Sharon and I looked at each other and whispered, "They're speaking English." It had been so long since we'd heard native speakers. We started chatting with the couple like long-lost friends. I have found that when traveling, people seek a common denominator. In the U.S., if you ask someone where you're from, and someone tells me North Carolina, like, "I'm from North Carolina," and we bond. Overseas, that broadens to, "I'm from the U.S., I'm from the U.S., and then you become instant friends. And in a country not overly touristed like Slovenia, the lens widens even more. Now our common denominator was that we spoke English, albeit with different accents. It was like finding a long-lost friend. I find this so funny, but it's so true. Noma also happened to be in town, so we had a fantastic seafood risotto at ironically the restaurant below the pub that Sharon and I like to hang out in. The meal was so good that Sharon and I returned the next day to have the exact same thing for lunch. And while in this area, you want to be sure to try the cream cake, which is famous throughout Europe, and it was invented here. One thing I liked that One Foot Abroad did was not move us around too much. We would have a base camp for at least a couple of days. This saves so much of your vacation time, you don't have to pack and unpack and move around so much. And where they put us was a lot nicer than I'd normally cough up for myself. Yet I found the tour price to be quite reasonable. They gave us a discount because I'm an affiliate, but the price itself is quite reasonable. It's a great way to economically tour Europe. Next up, we're back on foot. Our van driver collects our bikes and then takes us in the van up to the top of the mountain to the Poljuka Plateau. Our job today is to get back down this mountain and over to Lake Bohinj. We are just hiking about 7.5 miles, about 12 kilometers. Easy peasy. While up on the ridge, you get a breathtaking view of the valley down below. We were as far up as you could be, All we had to do was go down. Today is the only day we missed a turn, though. It wasn't a big deal, as we could see villages down below, and so it's easy to determine whether you're going up or down, and we knew we had to go down. We just took a different path to get there. Today is also the first day we had a bit of rain. It was one of those, does it want to rain or doesn't want to rain? So the jackets kept coming off and going back on. I think we missed our turn when we were crossing a farm. There's a cute chapel we went over to investigate. And I must say, a lot of people have their own private chapels over here. So maybe we're getting a little too confident in our navigation skills. Whatever the reason was, somehow or another we missed a turn. And after a while, we realized we should have hit that turn by now. So obviously we'd missed it. The question was, do we want to climb back that mountain and figure out where we went wrong, or do we want to just work our way down? And like I said, you could tell where down was. We were on a trail. It was heading down. You couldn't get so lost in the woods, and we could always, if we got terribly messed up, climb back up. So we decided we were going to make our own way back down. I always pin my lodging on my map app when I arrive at a new place, so I can always find my way back home, even if I don't have cell service. So that, combined with my All Trails app, which works offline, and of course we didn't have any cell service, also showed that whatever path we were on, we were going to eventually reach that town down below. And sure enough, sometime later we did. We probably added a couple more miles to our hike than were necessary, but we were proud that we found civilization again all by ourselves. I don't recall if we ever met a single hiker that day. Looking down into the leaf litter, eagle-eyed Sharon noticed the coolest salamanders. These guys were huge with bright yellow and black markings. And then once we trained our eyes to look for them, we saw them everywhere, seeing at least a dozen or more. As we entered the small village, there were some men doing some renovations on a house. We had just popped out of the woods like mushrooms, and they were startled to see tourists there. I imagine this little village, everyone knows everyone else, and we certainly didn't belong to anyone else. We smiled and greeted them, and they greeted us back and stared at us puzzled. Before we made it to the lake, we came across a pasture filled with cows and this one calf. Remember, it was a really drizzly day, and this calf was having a really bad hair day, or at least his expression was showing that he was having a bad day in general. I'll bet you I took a dozen photos of this one cow. He was hysterical. I'll put a photo on the website so you can see for yourself. It is bar none my best cow picture ever. Before long, we see the lake in the distance, and eventually we make it to Lake Bohinj, in the heart of the Triglav National Park. Then we checked in to our final inn. The weather had turned. Originally, we had planned to head to the lake for dinner, but looking at the sky, we're like, nah, I don't think so. Good choice. Not only did we keep warm and dry, we had an outstanding meal at the hotel. Unlike the U.S., where hotel food is terrible, I have to say, in all my months I've been over here, I have never had a bad meal at a hotel. Sometimes they were my best meals. I devoured the delicious duck while Sharon enjoyed the lamb. Her dish looked equally tasty, so the next night, that's what I ordered. And Sharon had looked over at the Dutchman we were chatting with and liked the looks of his ribs, so that's what she ordered the next day. Slovenian food is good. The weather that night progressively got worse. In the morning, we were supposed to kayak Lake Bohinj, but neither of us felt like doing it in this weather. So Sharon opted to walk around the lake, which is about 7 miles, 11 kilometers. I wanted to go see the green waterfall called Savica Waterfall. I didn't realize how far off the lake path it was. It ended up being about 6 miles to get there. I was drenched and I had a total rain jacket malfunction. This was a new, untested raincoat I'd bought for this trip as my other one was spent. Even when it kept me dry, the interior was clammy. So what's the point? At the end of the day, I was drenched inside and out. But I was wearing wool, so I was warm. I was just waterlogged. And frankly, I was surprised no one offered me a lift. I was right by the road. I had these baby doe eyes when a van or a large car approached, but they all just drove past. I must have looked pitiful. By the way, you will see our little friendly goat on a rock here as well, presumably also guarding the lake. It was about 3 or 4 miles to the turnoff to the waterfall, and then quite a ways uphill to the falls itself. It was worth it, but when I got there, I was so waterlogged that when I made it back to the lake, instead of walking the section around that I had not walked, supposedly the prettier side, I chose to beeline it back to the lodge in a hot shower. I regret that choice. What would it have taken me, an extra 15-20 minutes? Granted, things were quite foggy and it was hard to see the mountaintops. But still, I was disappointed in myself. I should have sucked it up. There's a cable car you could take at the lake that takes you up about 5,000 feet, around 1,500 meters. In the foggy clouds, there would be nothing to see, so we passed on that as well. Sometimes the weather just doesn't cooperate. The key thing is to have the right gear, and this is really important. Test it before your trip. I didn't have that luxury since I'm vagabonding right now, and I had my new gear sent to my sister's house just before the trip, since I don't have a home anymore. But you can be sure that REI is going to get back this raincoat that I paid a lot of money for when I make it back to the States. This coat was expensive, but it wasn't good. So even if I have to replace it with one that costs more, I'm going to do so because it's worth it to have the proper gear. As my mom and other smart folks say, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear. Hopefully I'll have the opportunity to check out my next raincoat before I head to Costa Rica. Speaking of which, there's still a couple of spots left since 2 people had to cancel due to health reasons. Email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com if you want details. It's going to be a blast. A hard blast, but a blast. It's also going to suck up most of your April of 2022, but you will return with memories for a lifetime. After breakfast the next morning, our self-guided Slovenian multi-sport tour was over and it was time to move on. So that morning, Sharon and I parted ways. Happily, at least I believe, neither of us wanted to take the knife out that we'd posed with on the night that we met. I thought that we got along splendidly, and I look forward to hiking with her again in Costa Rica, and I hope she feels the same. Mr. MasterCard would have solved any problems we had, but like I said earlier, we adventure travelers are made of different stuff, and we adapt, and I like to think that we're considerate of other people's ways, realizing after our travels that our way is not the only way. And I think that as a whole, we're better at going with the flow than most people. That being said, after a month of being and rooming with others every day, I was looking forward to my 10 days solo before my bike and boat trip from Split to Dubrovnik, which I'm going to cover next month. I absolutely loved my Slovenia trip. I cannot more highly recommend visiting Slovenia, and when you do so, go with my affiliate One Foot Abroad. You can use my exclusive promo discount code ATA5, ATA5, to get 5% off of any of their European hiking and biking tours. You can use that same promo code if you book with an El Camino tour with their sister company, Follow the Camino. I'll put links to both in the show notes. This multi-sport tour ranks as one of my favorites for sure. I love the variety of activities, the great food, the incredible scenery, the fine lodging, and of course, sharing it with my roommate, axe murderer Sharon. Kidding, of course. Be sure to check out all the pictures on the website. I put a ton of them of this waiting to be discovered country. On a heavier note, I know that COVID is making a lot of us anxious. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been in Europe since Europe of 2021, and I'm recording this in almost the middle of January of 2022. I have yet to meet anyone who's had or knows anyone who's had COVID in the last 6 months. I personally think they've got herd immunity here, certainly in the Balkans. Most of the time on these things that we're doing, I'm outside anyway and away from people, so it's pretty safe. So my question is, what are your current thoughts on travel during this time? What are your travel plans for 2022? Where do you want to go? I would love to hear and to have a conversation in English. Please write to me at kit@activetraveladventures.com and let me know what you're thinking. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.